Yeah, welcome back to the class. Today we are concluding the seventh week in which we looked at structuralism as a very important theoretical framework that was used to understand Indian society in general and caste system in particular. I hope you remember in the last 4 classes we had a very elaborate discussion on structuralism in India and more specifically on Louis Dumont, the one of the most important sociologist of Indian society, and we looked at his magnum opus, the Homo Hierarchicus, in detail. I believe we spent 3 sessions looking into various aspects or arguments of Louis Dumont in general. And I also hope you remember that Louis Dumont and his theoretical intervention, especially the introduction of structuralism as a theoretical framework, it was a very radical, departure from the conventional ways in which Indian society and caste system were understood. So Dumont introduced structuralism as a very innovative theoretical framework, and he also to a large extent kind of dismissed the existing theoretical and methodological framework, saying that these scholars have not really understood the most fundamental structural elementary aspects of Indian society, and that is typical of every structuralist intervention. And no wonder Dumont was subjected to a host of criticisms, because this kind of a theorization was quite new, and almost every Indian scholar who has engaged with the question of Indian society and caste system had to engage with Dumont. They had a series of debates with Dumont, and both directly as well as indirectly. For example, T.N. Madan organized a conference basically to discuss this his work and the kind of disagreements. So almost every scholar of repute in Indian society had to critically engage with Dumont's arguments. So that is the very reason why we consider Louis Dumont and this Homo Hierarchicus as one of the most influential works on Indian caste system, because for any student of sociology or caste system, Louis Dumont is somebody whom cannot be ignored. So what are the major criticisms leveled against Louis Dumont? So that is what we are going to look at in this class. And among various scholars who have written, one of the most notable criticisms against Louis Dumont is provided by Gerald D Berman, titled Brahminical View of Caste. And this essay is also included in the book edited by Deepankar Gupta titled Social Stratification. So it's quite easily available. And I'm also including a couple of criticism leveled by T.N. Madan at the end of the class. So let us look at Gerald Berreman's criticism against Dumont. And as you can see, this very title itself is very provocative. He says what Dumont presents is a Brahminical view of caste. And the very title tells you that Berreman accuses Louis Dumont of providing a ideological and theoretical justification for an oppressive system like caste. So let us see what are the kind of very specific criticism that Berreman comes up with. The first one is the assumption that there is a clear and consistent universal and fundamental disparity between what the author terms traditional or simpler societies, that is Indian, and modern ones, that is French. He says it is a problem. Again, you know that we have mentioned it several times. Dumont believes that societies like French are modern, and they harbor ideologies like egalitarianism and individualism, whereas societies like India are more traditional, where collectivity is important. That is why he calls for a sociological apperception to understand that society. So Berreman finds issue with this very fundamental division of society into these 2 categories. And Dumont finds that traditional society is to be characterized by conceptions of the collective nature of man, by the primacy of social rather than individual goals, and this hierarchy, by which he means ritual hierarchy based on the purity pollution opposition. Yeah, modern societies are characterized contrastively by individualism and hence by egalitarianism, the antithesis of hierarchy. And this is a familiar concept to all of you. We have been discussing that. Dumont begins with this basic assumption that these societies are very different, at least in the observable empirical dimension, because the French have a deeper commitment to egalitarianism and individualism, whereas less developed societies or traditional societies like India are more collective in their character. So this, he says, to what extent Dumont could escape the ethnocentric viewpoint? Does Dumont really believe that individuals are as submerged by Indian society, as submissive to it, as conformist to its ideologies, as this book implies? If so, how can he reconcile this notion with first-hand experience in India, where, as all empirical studies have demonstrated, people are willful, factionalized and individually variable as people anywhere else? It's a very fundamental question. So does he accuses, Berreman accuses Dumont of being Eurocentric, because this is a very old trope. Again, as you know, this is a very old colonial trope that British is the land of modernity and individualism, whereas India is the land of collectivity and traditionalism. Okay, there is no individualism in India. There is no individual in India. Everybody is a part of a village, or everybody is a part of a religion or a caste, and people cannot think individually. Okay, so this was a very important assumption. So he Berreman questions Dumont on this account, asking, does Dumont really believe that individuals are as submerged by Indian society, as submissive to it, as conformist to its ideologies as this book implies? Okay, so does he think that the people whom he met in India, are they all submerged or submissive to the kind of a collective force of Indian society? If so, how can he reconcile this notion with the first-hand experience in India? And as you know, a person like Dumont must have conducted a very intense fieldwork in India. So Berreman is asking, is it what Dumont came across in Indian society, as people have are completely subsumed and submissive to the kind of a collective force in India, as willful, factionalized? So has he not seen anybody as people as willful or factionalized and individually variable as people anywhere else? Second major criticism that Berreman raises is the notion that power and economic and political factors are distinct from and epiphenomenal to caste, and that ritual hierarchy is a central fact of caste, independent of power. And Berreman says that, I would assert that power structure opposition is a false dichotomy in the context of caste. These two are inseparable. Okay, so Berreman again finds fault with the fundamental assumption of Dumont, and let me repeat it. This is a point which was heavily criticized, or the most heavily criticized part in Dumontian scheme. And people like Dipankar Gupta, people like almost every other sociologist has criticized Dumont for providing a kind of a deterministic sole significance to this ritual purity, or what he calls it as a pure hierarchy based on religious ideals and religious values as a defining and determining factor of caste society. So I hope you remember that Dumont is very assertive in his characterization that caste system is constituted, okay, on the basis of it's constituted on the ritual hierarchy, and which is religious in its character, and that is the core ideology that constitutes the opposition between pure and impure. Okay, and all other important forms of hierarchy like economic situation, economic condition, or political power are epiphenomenal. Okay, and they are not the real constituent character of caste society. And Berreman, like many other people, he vehemently opposes to this formulation. So I would assert that the power status opposition is a false dichotomy in the context of class. These two are inseparable. So Berreman argues that this dichotomy between status and power, and hope you remember, Dumontian formulation is the opposition between pure and impure and the disjuncture between status and power. Okay, so especially this latter disjuncture, according to Berreman and others, is a false one. My objection in this regard is not to injustice done by Dumont to the analysis of his academic peers, but to the injustice he does to the people of India. 2000 years of struggle to escape the oppression of their status by those caste system deprives cannot be dismissed as the projection of sociocentric Western scholar any more than that oppression can be justified by Sanskrit text known only to elites. The oppression of caste and the attempts to overcome it are not epiphenomenal to caste. They are integral and inevitable part of that. So Berreman takes a very maybe a polemical, an activist kind of a position, saying that this kind of a scholarly position that Dumont adopts, that I am not concerned, I am not talking about the consequence of caste system, but rather my objective is to understand that. Okay, and Dumont is also being criticized for being soft on the on the consequences of caste system. So Berreman argues that this kind of an objection, that everybody in India, every party in India, every person in India do subscribe to this kind of an to this pure ideology, and any opposition to that are not something a part of this Indian society, something very objectionable. So he says it is not only the injustice done by Dumont to the analysis of his academic peer, but also to the injustice he does to the people of India. 2000 years of struggle to escape the oppression of the status by those caste system deprived cannot be dismissed as the projection of socio-centric Western scholars any more than the oppression can be justified by Sanskrit text known only to the elite. So this particular argument, he says that providing this kind of scholarly justification is highly problematic. The oppression of caste and attempts to overcome it are not epiphenomenal to caste. They are integral and inevitable parts of that. Then he says, Dumont fails almost totally to recognize caste for what it is on an empirical level. Okay, institutionalized inequality, guaranteed differential access to valued things in life. Okay, so Berreman actually argues that the most important, okay, or the most fundamental dimension of caste system is that it actually is an institutionalized system of inequality. Okay, it is a system, it's an over pervasive system, a very comprehensive system that actually institutionalizes inequality and divides resources into different strata on the basis of people's birth in a particular segment. Okay, so the most empirical level, caste system is its side effect is the institutionalized inequality, guaranteed differential access to valued things in life. So because you are placed in a particular hierarchy, you are meted out with a kind of a specific form of redistribution, and the most important valued things are also given to you on the basis of your relative position. When he chits Thomas or Wildman for confusing inequality with exploitation, Dumont notes that he failed to see that the system assures subsistence to each proportionately to his status. Okay, so this is a way in which Dumont justifies the stratification, this arrangement, this hierarchy, that the system assures subsistence to each proportionately to his status. Okay, so if somebody is here, somebody is here, somebody is here, somebody is here, every person, every group is assured of subsistence to each proportional to his status. And Berreman rightly points out that is indeed precisely what it does. This is the problem. Okay, this is the problem. It also assures life, comfort, health, self-respect, food, shelter, learning, pleasure, security, education, legal redress, rewards in the next life, and all of the other necessary and valued things proportionately to status. And that is what exploitation is, that is what oppression is, providing for those at the top proportionately to the status and at the expense of those at the bottom. Okay, so when you say that somebody is ritually hierarchical, ritually superior, and they are placed here based on Dumont's own admission, they are given proportionately. So people who are ritually superior would be given proportionately on a higher scale compared to than people who are placed here, who are at a ritually much lower one. So it is not only the kind of ritual or religious respect that is accorded, but almost every other essential aspects of your life that define the quality of your life, that define the life chances are distributed according to your relative position. So almost everything into the comfort, health, self-respect, food, shelter, almost everything is distributed on the basis of this relative position. And the third point of Berreman's criticism is the notion that caste occurs only in India and is not subjected to cross-cultural comparison. Incomparability cannot only be deduced or refuted by knowledge of both phenomenon, and the complementary ignorance of Cox and Dumont does not add up to a convincing argument. And I hope in the last class we mentioned that for Dumont, caste system is something that is exclusive to Indian society, and that's how he argues. The very the nature of Indian society is different, and Berreman finds fault with that argument. He says that you can't really rule out comparison until and unless you actually venture into this analysis in a comparative framework, and then come up with the possible similarities and differences, and only after that you will be able to rule out this possibility of comparison. And the limited and the fourth one, maybe a very important criticism, is a limited, biased, albeit scholarly sources of evidence upon which the arguments are based. So this is again highlighted by almost everybody, including T.N. Madan and including Dipankar Gupta and almost every other scholar who argues a particular kind of theorization adopted by Dumont. Okay, so Dumont does not come to theorization on the basis of available evidences. Okay, so that's how the kind of one particular kind of theorization works. You arrive at a theory on the basis of the material at hand. On the other hand, being a structuralist, Dumont prepares a theory. Okay, Dumont comes with a theory, and then he tries to establish that theory, the authenticity of the theory, by bringing in convenient facts. Okay, so a lot of anthropologists and sociologists have pointed out that there are so many contravailing examples, there are so many contradictory evidences available from rich ethnographic studies that have come up from in India, which go against the basic argument of Dumont. But he dismisses all of them as kind of epiphenomenon, as kind of unimportant thing, which these people are not ready to agree. So Dumont relies heavily on some classical Sanskrit text while ignoring others, a technique that is inevitable with such sources, but which enables one to prove almost anything one wishes. So this is the problem with any textual analysis or any reliance on this ancient texts which are can be quite flexible in terms of its ability to offer you explanations. He attends surprisingly little to the expansive empirical literature on village and on caste in India, which has emerged during the post-independence era, including much of which appeared prior to the writing of the first edition of the book in French 1966. So Berreman, like many other people, criticized Dumont for ignoring the abundant ethnographic material collected by fellow scholars, and also very selectively choosing required arguments or context or the material from the scriptures. And because a reliance on scriptures and then try to argue a point is much easier, because as you know, scriptures are many times are amenable to multiple interpretations, multiple explanations. Many times they are contradictory to each other. So that's a very highly sensitive way in which one goes about making theory. So the result is that he conveys a view of caste which is artificial, stiff, stereotypical and idealized. It is a view which conforms rather closely to the high caste ideal of what the caste system of Hindu India ought to be like, according to those who value it positively. It conforms well to the theory of caste purveyed in learned Brahminical tracts. So that is maybe the damning, most devastating criticism leveled against Dumont, that what ultimately Dumont does or did through his work Homo Hierarchicus was to present a very nuanced, sophisticated, theoretical and ideological justification for the Brahmins. Okay, or he provided a kind of a Brahminical explanation, Brahminical theory about the existence of caste. Why that the people at the top must be respected, why that they must be separated from others, why that there should be endogamy, why that there should be division of labor, why that certain people ought to be identified to do all the defiling jobs all the time, okay, while the others must be rescued from that. So all these things are beautifully explained by Dumont through his theory. Okay, because if you look into, for example, if you look into the question of say manual scavenging, okay, manual scavenging as a practice existed in India, it still exists, though officially it is outlawed. So manual scavenging is a system in which the upper caste people are able not to think about the excreta that they produce. Okay, so their only obligation is to go in the morning or whenever they want and relieve themselves, and what happens to that human excreta is not their headache. There is a system in place. There are other sections of the population who go to their houses every day, collect this human excreta, and then go and then dump it somewhere else. Okay, so these people are saved from doing this defiling job. So is the case with the death of a animal. Okay, so the dead body which might started rotting, which might be very difficult to dispose. So there are sections of people, okay, who will do this diligently. Okay, so such arrangement, okay, which what Dumont did according to Berreman, was given certain kind of justifications, was given certain kind of more sophisticated justification through this analysis, and that is why Berreman calls this book as a Brahminical view of caste, even though Louis Dumont was not a Brahmin. Now coming to T.N. Madan's criticisms, what distinguishes this work from the usual social anthropological discussions of caste is that it does not proceed from fieldwork to a model of how the system works. Okay, just the point what we just mentioned. His theory building was very different, was very distinct from the conventional ways. Instead, it begins with a cardinal explanatory principle, that is hierarchy, and boldly sets out to build a model their own, maintaining throughout the position that theory or ideology overrides and encompasses ethnography. The same preoccupation and the consequent devaluation of the ethnographic datum also bothers some of Dumont's critics most. They complain of his cavalier attitude towards empirical evidence. So, as I mentioned, almost every scholar worth the salt were critical of this very dismissive attitude of Dumont towards empirical evidences that are contrary to his project or contrary to his argument. Das and Uberoi, Veena Das and Uberoi, J.P. Uberoi, and Heitzman also acknowledge the importance of Dumont's work, but they express their doubts about the adequacy of his use of the structuralist approach and therefore of his model. Das and Uberoi would like the pure-impure dichotomy to be replaced by the more inclusive opposition between the sacred and the non-sacred. And Veena Das is another important scholar who used structuralist approach in her early work to study inner society. So they suggested that the pure and impure may be too limiting character, and rather they wanted the categories of sacred and the non-sacred as this one. Then Dumont, T.N. Madan's own argument is that the question of social change. How does Dumont address this? Okay, so Madan acknowledges that Dumont's theory is insufficient to provide an adequate explanation on social change. Dumont constructs a model of traditional Hindu society. It is to be presumed that the structure evolved over time. It is not clear, however, at what time Dumont believes that the crucial structural element of the caste system as presented to him to have crystallized. It seems that once the crystallization took place, all further changes was ruled out. And this is a very interesting aspect of caste system, and also that of the structuralist explanation. Okay, if you go by structuralist explanation, it makes you believe that the society has some deeper undetected structural character which was there from the very beginning, and while the peripheral or the superficial aspects of society undergo change, the core remains the same. If that is the case, the question, when did this structural changes come into picture, because caste system, as we know, has a very specific historicity. Okay, you don't have mention of caste during Vedic period, so there is a kind of widespread acceptance that caste system came into existence almost some 2000 years ago. Okay, so if that is the case, how did that society undergo such kind of a dramatic change to the extent that the very structural element of society underwent transformation? And also, Dumont is dismissive of the changes. He says that it is a change of the society, change in the society, and not change of the society. Okay, so he's typical to the structuralists, are not ready to understand the ways in which society undergo change. Okay, so these are the major criticisms leveled by many scholars, including Berreman. Then there is a criticism by Quigley, then by Dipankar Gupta in his work on discrete identities and continuous hierarchies and discrete castes. So as I mentioned, almost every scholar worth the salt started critically engage with Dumont, because that was such a powerful intervention, created a lot of controversy, created a lot of new work on Indian society, and that is why Louis Dumont and Homo Hierarchicus continues to be some of the central figures or central points in the study of Indian caste system. Okay, so let's wind up the class today and move to the next chapter, that is subaltern studies. Thank you.